Hey, it's Keisha here with Defending the Early Years podcast. We'll be focusing on amplifying the voices of early childhood educators, advocates, and all of those who love children. Hello, everybody. Today, I'm so excited to have Alissa Mwenelupembe. I met Alissa years ago, maybe 8 years ago. Alissa, was it 8 years ago?
Probably something like that. It's been a long time.
And I met her at a pep rally, Playing Powers Conference. And, there were a lot of people there. You meet a lot of people, but there was something about this Alissa girl that really stuck with me. Alissa, you really had the heart for this. Like, we talked a lot about your work with families when I met you.
Mm-hmm.
And just from that moment on, I was inspired. I'm still inspired, and I'm so happy to have you here. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, your passions, and what you do in this wonderful field of early childhood education?
Sure. And I'm so happy to be here with you today, Keisha. I really enjoyed meeting you as well, because I think we're so very different in how we find our strength in this work. And so where, you do such amazing things with children every day, I learned pretty quickly that while I love, admire, respect children, working with them every day was not where I did my best work. So a little bit about me. I have been in a lot of different roles in early childhood. I've been a teacher. I've been a director. I've been a coach. So the majority of my career thus far has been spent as a director, working with educators, which I think is where I do find that I can be the most impactful to support educators in the work that they do. Most recently, last year, I joined the staff at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, NAEYC, where I am leading the early learning program accreditation team and really trying to push accreditation forward into the future and make sure that it is inclusive and meets the needs of educators and children and families all across the country. In my free time, I am working on my doctorate. I'm actually writing my dissertation as we speak, and thinking about Black women and how they experience the leadership pipeline in early childhood education.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing work. And that's what I mean by, I said this to you earlier, that you put your money where your mouth is, right? You have identified some things that need to be changed, work that needs to be done. And instead of sitting back and complaining or, muddling about it, you have put yourself in positions to actually make things happen. I'm so inspired by that. And you're right. We do have different avenues. And I lean on you sometimes to help me when it comes to the director role, when it comes to the working with the adults who are working with children. So could you give us any insight on your journey? How did you come to that place? How and when in your journey did you go from being a teacher to deciding that the director role is for you? And then tell us a little bit about your work in that role, because I know recently you did some major work at a school where I just watched the progress and the shift in the mindsets of the educators. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so like most things in my life, I found myself as a director because as a young educator at 23 years old, I think, I was working in a program. I was actually working in the office. I wasn't even working in a classroom. And I got to be friends with the director and, went to that side of the building every day. And I would spend time with the infants, and I would spend time in the classrooms. And I would watch my friend, she's my friend now, and how she moved through the building and the work that she did. And I said, I think I want to do that. And I did. I immediately, after I decided that, started applying for roles where I would be the director. And so I got my first director position. I was 23, 24 years old, something like that, not at all prepared to do that sort of work. I went to a program that was huge, had 10 classrooms, 150 children, and I had 50 staff, where I had never been a manager before. I had never, been at that level. And actually, I hadn't even been a teacher for that long. So it was kind of ridiculous that I even decided I would do that. But I had amazing mentors that worked with me that were able to help me to continue to grow in that position, even though it was really, really hard. So, it was kind of dumb luck that I was able to find myself there. And it was awful. Like, it was like the worst time ever. I was awful at it. I cried every day. But I don't think I'd take it back because, I'm the type of person that if I want to learn how to do something, I jump in and I learn how to do it. And that was that experience for me.
Well, I guess that gives a lot of people hope who are right now in that position, like with COVID and just in general, it's a hard job. So
Yeah.
hearing that someone started there and that there is a light at the end of the tunnel will be refreshing for a lot of people, I am sure.
Oh, definitely. And that's one of the things that I feel really strongly about is just like authenticity. And so when I was a coach and when I was a trainer and doing all those things, like I would tell the stories of like my worst day in the classroom or my worst day as a director, because like everybody has to start somewhere. Just because you started somewhere doesn't mean that that's where you end. I had awful practice when I was a teacher because I was just figuring it out as I went along. My bachelor's degree is in English. I didn't even go to school to learn about pedagogy or, methods. I went to my master's program and learned some of those things, but most of it I learned because I had to figure it out in real time. And I looked to people around me that could help to guide me in how, I might find a better way to do something.
Exactly. For me, most of my learning came directly from children,
Mm-hmm.
they will tell you what they need. It's
Right.
just a matter of if we're listening, right?
Yeah.
So that definitely helped me. And it helps me not only in my role as an educator, but it helps me in my role working with adults because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of what children need are what we need as humans, right? It's just a
Yep.
pure version of what we need as humans. It's much easier for me with children as it is than it is with adults, but um, everyone shines where they shine.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I so you worked at this program with, I mean, that's a huge program. So you took on
Yeah.
a lot. You jumped in. So
Yes.
you worked at
And
this
I,
program.
oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, you tell me.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I worked in that huge program. And when I left there, I told myself I'm never going to be in a program that large again. And then I found myself in the last program that you referenced, St. Vincent, where I was for about 3 years and did some massive shifts in the culture and the work there. And I thought 10 programs was large. I went into St. Vincent, we had 13 classrooms. So I did exactly what I told myself I would never do again, but it was a joy to be there.
I was going to say, but you can put those two experiences side by side and see how
Mm,
far you came between the one and the other, because watching your work at St. Vincent, it was so intentional. I could
mm.
see, I mean, I'm far away and just seeing what you're showing, and I could see the work behind it. So can you tell us when you first came to St. Vincent, like, how did that come about? How did your, because here's the reason why I'm asking this. I get a lot of questions from people who say, all right, how do you change people's minds?
Mhm,
I'm a director, I work at this program, I'm new, I'm young, or whatever it may be. And I have a staff who's used to doing it one way. And
mhm.
how do I get them to shift their mindset? So I think that's the hardest part. We might have a vision, or we might have that understanding that you said you gained once you went to your master's and through all of your experience, but how do we then bring our staff along? So what are some of your tips or ideas for that?
Yeah, and I was just having this conversation with a director a few days ago through chat. She was a teacher that worked for me and reached out. She's now a director, and she's like, "Alyssa, how did you do that? Because this is what I want to do here." And I, like she experienced it as a teacher, but like she didn't know what was going on in my head. And so, like, I think there's a few things that I tried to focus on. One of the first things that I was really honest about when I was recruited for that director position, because they were in a kind of a shift. They had funneled a lot of money into the program. So teachers were able to have a living wage, which was huge. They were able to really support the classrooms with materials that they needed, but it was still a very traditional program, very teacher directed. And, the other thing about this program was that historically, when children were not successful in other centers, they ended up at St. Vincent. And so you layer all of this together with, when I walked into that building, there were teachers that were stressed out. They were very disconnected. There was no like culture there of like, we're going to support each other. It was really like, I'm in it for myself and I can only care about what I need in this moment. There were children with some significant behavior challenges because of, their trauma or previous experiences or what have you, but also educators that didn't have the tools that they needed to support those children in appropriate ways. So one of the first things I said to my executive director when she hired me was, I can change this. I said, but I need you to give me time because this didn't happen overnight and it's going to not be changed overnight. Mm-hmm. So, I said, give me a year to figure out what the problem is, and then I will come up with a solution. And it didn't take a year, but I think it was important for me to just kind of like be really transparent in that nothing's going to change for a while. And that was something I had learned from like previous mistakes of trying to go in, like, I'm ready, I'm going to steamroll you all because this is what we're going to do. Like, that was what I had to learn the hard way.
Yeah, people immediately push back to that,
Oh yeah.
It's their place, it's their baby, and the first thing that they do is push back. And I think that's one of the major problems that I gather from when people tell me their stories of, okay, well, I went in there, wanted to do these things, and no, everyone fought me. They all hate me. So just like with kids and families, that relationship piece is important to build.
Definitely. And that was really what I started with, was just trying to build relationships.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you built the relationships and you said it took less than a year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because people were just so hungry to have a relationship like that. I would go to the classroom and I would just like chat, like, hey, how was your weekend? Tell me about your kids. Tell me about your family. What are you, looking forward to? And like, not even talking about work necessarily, because that they had been in a culture that was so strict, so black and white. So like, you're doing it right or you're doing it wrong. And if you're doing it wrong, you're going to get like publicly shamed because you weren't doing what you were told to do. So, just kind of taking all of that away and just like being like human beings together, I think was what really needed to happen for us to build that foundation of trust, so that when it was time for me to have a hard conversation, or it was time for me to try to influence something that was happening in the classroom, like, they trusted me already because I had shown them that I saw them as an individual. I cared about who they were outside of the building, not just for the work that they did. And so it was much easier for me to start to push in that way.
Mm-hmm. And I will say that that's exactly the same way in which I think about parent relationships. A lot of times people talk about how, oh my gosh, how do parents allow to get their kids to do this or to do that? Or, how do you deal with a parent when you have to talk to them about their child? If you have those solid relationships in place, right, and that trust, there is very little that I can talk to a parent about. There's very little that we can't get through together, because they know that I have their child and their best interest in mind, versus them not knowing me or knowing my intentions, or not trusting me or trusting my intentions. So yes, that sounds like a core foundation of leadership.
Yeah. And so I just had to Google this quote because it really spoke to me as I was kind of embarking on this journey, and I reflect on it often. But it's by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, who wrote The Little Prince, which is a book I really liked as a kid. It's kind of a weird book, but I really I just really loved it when I was a little kid. And so the quote says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people to collect wood, and don't assign them tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. Mm-hmm. And so when I was thinking about how to work with educators to move our practice towards a a more Reggio inspired practice is where we were headed. And it wasn't about me telling them how to do anything. It was about me helping them to see the value in children having choices and opportunities and a voice, and how much more joy they would have as the adult in that space than what they were having in a very like controlled, methodical, rule-based space. And so, we got to the point where like they were coming up with the ideas. It wasn't me that was telling them what they should do. It was me saying like, what do you think about this? What do you notice is happening in your classroom? What are the children talking about? What are they excited about? And those were the stories we started to tell with each other. And I started this in like small groups. And so, with 13 classrooms, you're not going to change everybody's minds and hearts at the same time. And so I really, through building those relationships, I was able to kind of think about who's ready to start to think about their practice differently. And I actually just like created like an invitation of like, hey, I'm really thinking about having some conversations and studying some books together that would, give you some ideas of how to open up your classroom a little bit. And if you're interested in that, I'd love for you to join me. Let me know. And so I started with like a group of 4 out of the 28 teachers I had. And it just started to spread, because then those 4 classrooms started to change, and other people were looking and they were noticing that things were changing. They were noticing how the adults were changing, and they were noticing how the children were reacting to the changes. And then they started to think like, well, maybe I want to be a part of this too. And there's just always that sense of like a little bit of competition in that like, they're getting a lot of FaceTime with Alissa. They're getting a lot of praise. I like praise. Maybe I should think about joining this too.
Well, you're a genius. You really are good at this. You're right. You found your sweet spot. You really are good with this. And I think the people that got to work with you are so lucky. I know that you are no longer at St. Vincent. So what did that look like when it was time for you to go? Do you feel like the vision lived on? Do you feel like the seeds were planted deeply? How do you think your impression on that space is going now? What's the long-term effect of that, I guess is what
Yeah. So one of the last things that we did, we had a big year the last year I was there. So Deb Curtis is a mentor and a friend of mine. And so she came to be with us for a week at the center and work side by side with some of the teachers. We did a big institute. They were able to showcase the work that they had been doing for our early childhood community. So we had that moment, I think it was in March of that year. And then in the summertime, there's a Reggio collaborative in Evansville, Indiana area that we were in. And so we had Amelia Gambetti from Reggio come and spend some time in our center. And we got to spend time with her in smaller groups. And so it was like these big, like kind of culminating events of like, you all have busted your booties for the past 3 years to create this space that is beautiful and magical and just the warmest environment that I could imagine in this very like cold, like hospital-like building, because that's what we had to work with. Our outdoor environments had changed dramatically. There was just beautiful things happening and everyone feeling so supported and connected. And I was nervous to leave, but I knew I was ready because I had done everything that I could do at that point. Like I had gotten it to where it needed to be. Things were strong. So I left. My 2 assistant directors that worked side by side with me were still there. And I really did try to like leave and not continue to come back and be a part, because I wanted the next person to have, the same respect that I got with being able to do what was what I wanted to do with the program. And so it so happened that one of my very best friends took my director's spot, and he actually has taught me a lot about coaching and working in the Reggio way with educators and with children. And so there was a little bit of a gap there, which, is hard for a program when there's not a leader. But he's been there for almost 2 years now, probably.
Who is
and
it?
It's his name's Jared Toach.
Oh, okay. All right.
So Jared was with the school district, working in the early learning program there, which he works from a teacher all the way to growing, where they have classrooms that are all across the district that are all Reggio inspired, all doing beautiful things with children. So I felt really good.
What state is this in? Because I know listeners are going to want to know where is this place?
So this is in Indiana, Evansville, Indiana. So you can definitely look up the school district there. There was actually a article that highlighted them in a recent Teaching Young Children journal. I was able to get them a little bit of spotlight with our publications team at NACCE. So Jared's been there for a little while now. COVID has definitely affected the work that happens. I think that's just the reality. Staffing is hard. They've had to change some of the practices that they were able to do before because of COVID restrictions. There's been new leadership that came into the organization. So I feel like some of my core educators are still there, still doing great work. But struggling. That's just the reality of our profession right now. Like, it's just a struggle to be able to do what we know is right for children and families and what they deserve, because we have all of these hoops we have to jump through and all of these, real issues that COVID has brought to us. So I think they're hanging on. That's what I think they're doing right now.
Yes, I think we're all hanging on right now. You're right. Alissa, this has been a wonderful conversation, and I really want to touch more on your work with NACCE. It sounds like you and I are going to have to record again. So we can have Alissa part 2.
Sounds good.
I want you to tell us, how can we contact you? Because you talk to us about a lot of wonderful leadership things. And I know there are a lot of directors out there who need support right now. So if you can give us your information for contact, I know you do some coaching, I know you do some speaking. Where can we find you?
Yeah, so I always love to be able to hear from directors, because it helps me to stay grounded in what's happening on the outside. Because, working at NACCE is amazing. I love what I do, but I am very disconnected to everyday life in the programs, and I don't want to become completely disconnected. So I love to hear from people. I think the best way for anyone to reach out to me is going to be through my consulting Facebook page, which is called We Are Better Together Consulting. And you can look me up on Facebook, and you should be able to find that. And send me a message. I'd be happy to, talk with you a little bit, answer questions if I can. I am in the process of, writing this dissertation too. So I have a little less time than I've had historically, but I always respond. And if nothing else, I'll connect you to somebody that I know can support you in fully.
All right, wonderful. Are you still speaking, doing workshops, coaching, any of that? So if someone wants that, can they contact you as well?
I have done a lot less of that in the last year just because of time constraints. But if someone's interested in that, I would be happy to talk about it. And if it's not something that I can do, I have so many friends who do amazing work that I would be happy to refer you to.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It was so nice talking to you, and stay tuned, everybody, for part 2.
Great. Thanks, Keisha.
And that was another episode of the Defending the Early Years podcast. Defending the Early Years works to support the rights and needs of young children nationally. Learn more at DEY.org. Pay us a visit, sign up for our newsletter, or connect with us on social media. Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.